a year. His message will not be a message of empty celebration and blind sentimentality, but it will be a thought-provoking message, a message that will call us to action to fulfill the dreams of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. T'Shaka is not going to tell us anything or challenge us to do anything that he has not done or he is not doing himself. That's the mark of a good leader. His life has been a commitment of activism and service to his people. I would like to take the time out to thank the Martin Luther King Committee for sharing Dr. Oba T'Shaka so graciously with the community. Because the Martin Luther King Committee brought Dr. T'Shaka to Broward County, and because the Martin Luther King Committee networked with other organizations like the NAACP and D.M. Burke's book, Dr. T'Shaka has been circulated in the community since Saturday. And I want to thank personally Moselle Battle and Richard Kurtz for coordinating those efforts with us, for being so selfless and so unselfish in sharing your resources. Dr. T'Shaka has definitely been carrying out the mission of Dr. King since he's been here. On Saturday, he conducted an all-day workshop at the Old Dillon High School Museum on leadership, strategizing, and organizing for effective change. We had over 60 people, probably over 65 people in attendance at that workshop, and it was an excellent workshop. He made an impromptu, almost emergency guest appearance at Piney Grove First Baptist Church on yesterday to teach their class on African American history. He also lectured at D.M. Burke's book yesterday afternoon and was interviewed over WRBD. And all of these presentations were over an hour long, and the brother did not repeat himself not once. That's the genius of the man that's about to come before you. The brother is headed, and he's been working very hard since he's been here. And it's been good that we need the spirit that he is bringing to Broward County, the spirit of activism. We need that in order to help us to bring some clarity, unity, and consolidation to some of the issues and the things that are happening here in our community. Let me just tell you how heavy this brother is. He's a full professor at San Francisco State University, where he serves as the chair of the Black Studies Department. He has expertise in the areas of ancient African history, African American history, African philosophy, and Black political theory. He holds a PhD in education from Western Institute for Social Research. Dr. T'Shaka is a prolific writer, and his published works have appeared in many respected periodicals and journals. He is the author of books entitled The Political Legacy of Malcolm X and The Art of Leadership, Volume 1. Volume 2 will be out in March of this year. And both of these books are available for purchase at the table to my left over here. You can purchase them after the program. Dr. T'Shaka's activism in the Black freedom movement spans over 30 years. He has established a long list of impressive accomplishments and contributions, including that of being a renowned lecturer and a workshop facilitator. Currently, Dr. T'Shaka serves as an educational consultant to the National Urban League and the Episcopal Church. Let us give Dr. Oba T'Shaka a thunderous applause as we bring him to the podium. Get it up!
Dr. King is alive today. I want to say to you, African people, and I hope you know that if you're black, you're African. Because if you don't know it now, when I get through, I hope you understand. And I want to say to you, because this community is a special community, you have black people who come from the Caribbean. Is that right? Yeah. They come from Jamaica. They come from Haiti. They come from Barbados. And they came from Africa. And the only difference between the African American who lives in Fort Lauderdale, who came from the Caribbean, and the African American who came straight from Africa is when they stuck you on the good ship Jesus, they dropped some of you off in Brazil, some of you in the Caribbean, some of you in Florida. So don't you be talking about a Caribbean black person is different from an African American black person, because I'm here to tell you when the Ku Klux Klan decides to go outside black folks' heads, he doesn't care what kind of accent you have or what island you come from. So I want to say to the Martin Luther King Memorial Committee, I want to praise you for keeping this dream alive over the years. I want to say to the President, Richard Kurtz, and to all the officers of this committee, keep it going, keep doing it every year, and keep seeing that we do it throughout the year. And give all these people a hand. And you know, I enjoy talking to an audience like this because this is down home people, you know what I mean? For real people, you know what I mean? You don't have to come up here talking those big words and you will be able to be heard. Because my message today is the radical ministry of a king called Martin. I want to say it again. My message today is about the radical ministry of a giant among men, a king called Martin. Now, I feel especially honored that you asked me to keynote this address because in 1955, when a black woman in Montgomery, Alabama, said in the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer that she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And she said she would not give up a seat to a white man or a white woman. That she was the heart of racists, they whipped them so down to the ground. And you see, I was then in high school, and I saw that message in millions of black folks and he would tell you this. You must remember that the true makers of black history, the true makers of African history, are the everyday, ordinary black folks who clean in other people's houses, who sweep other people's floors, who kept care of other people's children, and who taught our children in our schools and who preached in our churches. You need to remember that the legacy of Martin Luther King is that it's everyday, ordinary black folks whose names will never appear in history, who make the history. And that was true yesterday. You see, because we come to honor the radical ministry of a king among men called Martin Luther King, that we just can't be here sitting about King. We have to be about acting on his legacy. Not just talking about it, but doing something about it. That's what King would want us to do in honoring his legacy. And you see, King was a humble man, and he said this in his first book called Stride Towards Freedom. You know, you can get it at D.M. Burke Company. You need to support these black bookstores. You need to get in there and read everything you can about your history. He said, when the black people rose up in the government, he said, I didn't organize this workout, but he said, when they called on a spokesperson, I stepped forward as a mouthpiece for the people. I want you to understand something, folks. The best leadership we have ever had have been true spokespersons for the people. They have spoke for what the people wanted, not for what those who oppress us wanted. And no matter how hard it was, they stood up on the social issue. And no matter how much they were criticized for it, they stood for the truth. And so we come here to honor a king called Martin Luther King, the radical ministry of Martin Luther King. This book, The Art of Leadership, the only book in the world that deals with African and African American leadership tradition, is drawn from the tradition of Martin Luther King. Now, we need to understand, as another brother who came out of the system, who had more in common than King than a lot of us think. Malcolm X taught us. You know, a lot of us have taught us that King was all good and Malcolm was all bad. You see, they were both for freedom. They just had different ways of approaching it. And I'm here to tell you that when your enemy tells you that your leadership is bad, you better take a good look at that leadership, because they're probably bad for them and good for you. And Malcolm said, of all studies, history is best designed to reward our leadership. Because he said, history tells you the origin of a thing. If you want to know how a thing developed, then you go to the history of a thing. Rather than you go marry a sister, go to the history of that sister. That's your mother. That's your grandmother. That's your great-grandmother. And a grandfather and father, too. And you want to know if you're married, then you're marrying But we were seeing a white woman called Elizabeth Taylor. Is that right? And when you saw Pharaoh Ramses, you thought you were seeing the Pharaoh Ramses, but you were seeing a Hollywood movie actor named Yul Brynner. Is that right? And when you saw Moses, you saw this right-wing movie actor, Carl Hess. Now, see, I want to bring this down to earth because we got a good king radical ministry up to the truth of this. You know, the people of ancient Egypt said, ye shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And I know that some people in here are afraid of the truth. And the more educated we are, the more brainwashed we are, and the more we can taught everybody else's story, and we're afraid to hear our own. So I hope you can open your ears up and listen. Open your minds up and listen. Because you see, I'm here to tell you that there was a European historian. He was Greek. His name was Herodotus. White people had the nerve to call him the father of history. Yet when the Greeks went to Egypt for education, y'all know Plato was educated in Egypt. Socrates was educated in Egypt. Pythagoras was educated in Egypt. These great black priests told him, you children of Greece are young in civilization. Because before you were civilized, we were building pyramids here in Africa. And then you know there was a time in history where a white man didn't feel that he was superior to a black man. And you see, so Herodotus traveled throughout Egypt, and he observed things. And he said, I observed, it was a matter of fact observation, because this was no big deal at this time. It's a big deal now because you've been hit with the disease of white ice. You know what I mean? And what he said these Egyptians looked like the Colchians. I'm quoting now from history. This is his exact word. He said they had woolly hair and black skin. Right. So I'm here to tell you something, sisters, that Cleopatra didn't look like Elizabeth Taylor. Cleopatra looked like these beautiful soul sisters sitting right here in this room. And I sure don't want you to know the king came from a royal line. You know, it's not by accident that he was called the king. Pharaoh meant king. You hear me? And the Pharaoh Ramses, the Pharaoh See, the Bible tells you that Jesus, who came as a man of peace, the Bible says he came with the sword. Is that right? Because he was going to uproot oppression, uproot wrongdoing. And isn't it true in the Bible it says that Jesus entered the temple and he saw all these money lenders, you know, modern terms, bankers, charging high rates of interest, savings and loan institutions that have now gone bankrupt and we're going to have to pay for it. Because the dumbest man that ever occupied a presidency in America or the world allowed deregulation of the banks so that savings and loans could take your money and buy yachts and buy mansions, and we have to pay for it. And so this radical Jesus went into the temple and he took those tables and threw them out. He said there will be no regular, honest people. Isn't that right? See, the king comes out of a radical ministry. And my brothers and sisters, if you have a radical ministry, you also have a conservative ministry. You see, Martin Luther King in his day, he fought that conservative white ministry, the Jerry Falwell, who stood for segregation, who stood for white supremacy, and who now have the nerve to call themselves members of the moral majority. We should call them the immoral minority. They are hypocrites. And so King said that you can't call yourself a Christian minister and stand up for segregation. But he also said to the black ministry, he said to the black ministry and the black leadership, you too should stand up for what's right. You too should teach the truth. And so King said that he was critical of white people who would take black folks and pat them on the head and give them a little money and put them on television and build them up. And I'm quoting King now, and he said after they got patted on the head and got a little money and got built up, he said their language began to change. You know what I mean? They start talking in those simple words, and they use those 7-syllable words that nobody understood, not even them. And then he said, as their money changed, he said their location changed. You know, they used to live in the black neighborhood, and then they started to move on the other side of town. And he said, whereas before they were loyal to the people, they began to look down at the people. Well, you see, King was saying, whether you're a minister, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a community leader, whether you're a parent, a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, grandparent, that you have to be a voice for the people and you have to stand for the truth. So King wanted a radical ministry. King wanted a radical leadership, a leadership in the mold of Jesus Christ, a leadership in the mold of this Pharaoh hot house. And we're here to honor a king among men, the radical ministry of Martin Luther King. And you know another legacy that Christianity drew out of ancient Egypt was a legacy that black folks understand, and I felt it in the singing of that choir. I felt it in the singing of the soloists, and it was the idea that God is a personal God that dwells inside of each of us. Isn't that true? And you see, in the ancient Egyptian teachings, the idea And you know, St. Augustine taught these same teachings that were the early Christian teachings. He said that inside man and woman, there were two cities. He said that there was a city of the lower self, the city of hatred and lies and deceit, and there was a city of God. And he said the purpose of life was for man and woman to rise from the lower city to the higher city. And I'm telling you, when black folks came to America, we carried this idea that God dwelled inside of us. Isn't that true? You see, there was a time when black folks had to work from can see to can't see. Got whipped if we did wrong or if we didn't do anything wrong. Went to the fields without food to eat. And the one thing that we had to console us was a belief that there was a God who practiced truth, that believed in justice, and this made it possible for us to move on. And King said this. He said his God was a personal God. King said in times of loneliness, his God gave him comfort. In times of fear, his God gave him courage. So you see, when you talk about fear, you've got to talk about this radical ministry. And you know something else? Martin Luther King came out of a radical ministry that was based on an idea that flowed through Christianity that came out of ancient Egypt. And this idea was that a man or a woman in life should have a mission in life. I want you to hear this, because this was key to King's thinking. I want to tell you something. You can be 30 years old, 6'7", muscular, weigh 250 pounds. You can play for the 49ers, or you can get in a ring and box. But if you don't have a mission in life, you're a 21 or a 31-year-old male, but you're not a man. You can be a grown-up female as fine as you can possibly be, but your whole realm of existence is the physical realm that you are a female, but you're not a woman. And you see, this ancient system, and this is real profound knowledge for you, it said, man and woman, before you know anything else, know yourself. It said that all knowledge starts with self-knowledge. If you think about it, we have black folks with PhDs, DD, and all kinds of D degrees. And they're experts in all kinds of things. We have nuclear physicists, astrophysicists, doctors, lawyers, mathematicians. We don't have enough of these. We need more with these scientific and technological skills. And I want to say to you young people that if you can sing with the soul that you can sing, music is mathematics. You hear me? Nothing is higher in the mathematical world than music. And if you get down into some math, the way you get down into the soul of the black folks, you will create a new mathematics. But you see, a lot of us who are experts in all this knowledge, we end up being educated fools because we were not educated in knowledge itself. We know everything about the Greeks and the Romans, but we don't know anything about the Egyptians or the Ethiopians, the commanders of the knowledge. And you see, this is because King said this. See, a lot of us don't read King. We should read him. He said slavery instilled in the minds of black folks an inferiority complex, where we believe that we were less than other people. You know, I read the slave narrative, and one of them slaves said, born a savage in Africa, civilized in America. You know, there was a great Western historian who said, he was talking about civilization. He said, America is the only society that moved from barbarism to savagery without ever experiencing civilization. You hear me? You know why he said it? Civilization is the kind We as a society founded on the murder of Native Americans. And you know, you're all coming from Florida. You need to realize this. Your first ally in this country, next to your own people, because the first unity we need to have is with black folks. You know, we need to have with all shades of skin color of black folks. You know what I mean? All shades of religious colors of black folks. You know what I mean? All shades of political colors of black folks. But what you need to understand, you know, when you're looking at the reality of black people, that it is necessary for us to realize that we are one people, and we realize that when we know who we are and where we came from. And so you see, we were programmed to believe we were savages in Africa. We were nothing in Africa. We were nothing in America. We are nothing, and therefore would be nothing. I'm here to tell you now, the drug traffic that plagues the black community, the most dangerous thing in the drug traffic is not the needle, it is the sense of nothingness that underlies that drug traffic. What I mean by nothingness is, you see, those old souls who bought someone else's view of him believes that he's nothing, you're nothing, we never will be nothing. So if he wastes your daughter, even if he wastes his own brother or sister, it's nothing. And if his life gets wasted, it's nothing. We got to end this dead inferiority complex. And you see, we have been programmed not to want to know self. See, our enemies are crafty in this split. And they will tell us that if you begin to know self, you're learning hate. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
You're learning to dislike other people. Well, I'm here to tell you, the fact that you love black folks does not mean that you hate any other people. It simply means that you're in love with yourself. You can be pro-black and pro-African without being anti-white or anti-any other people. So brothers and sisters, teachers, mothers, grandparents, community leaders, we must begin to tell our children the truth about our story. You know, it's a poor frog who won't praise his own pond. Is that right? Every frog thinks his pond is the best pond. It may be skimpy, it may be muddy, but he thinks his pond is the best pond. It's a poor mother who can't find at least one good thing to say about her children. Isn't that right? And I'm here to tell you, it's a poor people who can't find some good things to say about themselves because you are far from nothing. Your people had to sacrifice for you and I to be right here. As King said, we are somebody. And so, my brothers and sisters, we need to understand that far from being nobody, you see, for hundreds of years, as the white man gained control of the world, he began to debate who was the first man and who was the first woman. And he could not believe that it would be any other than the Caucasian man or woman, the European man or woman. And he went to such extremes to prove it that he planted a skull in England, right? A skull that was made of an H jaw and a newly dyed man's head. And he colored it up and he made it look old. And for 35 years, white scholars were saying, oh yes, the first man was born in England. Until they performed radiocarbon tests on that skull, and they found out that that man had just died a few years ago. And his jaw wasn't even new. Second in taxes, understand? A man named Charles Darwin, a white man, who came up with a theory of evolution, said before the greatest scientific thinkers in the Western world, he said that it seems to me that human life started in Africa. But you know, the Western world laughed at him. But then you know what happened. white folks started digging in the ground, and they started finding skulls. They found the skull in Africa, 4 million years old. No skull anywhere in the world of a human being is old. And then, listen to this, they found the skeleton of a beautiful black woman who they called Lucy, who dated back to 3.5 million years ago. You hear what I'm telling you? So far from telling your children that they accomplished nothing on the tree of civilization, you have to say to your children that God was gracious enough to the black man and black woman to give to the world the most precious gift you can possibly give, human life. And you know, if we go to the souls of black folks, we are a humane people. We are about the only people in this country that when we struggle for freedom, we include everybody else in our struggle. King did that. King didn't just fight for black folks. He fought for all people. And I believe that that's the genetic makeup of African people. Because when your mother and father humanity, you have a value for all human life. You know, you need to ask yourself, why is it important that we know that black folks gave birth to humanity? Because see, we've been brainwashed and told that that old dusty calf isn't important. But then they'll tell us George Washington never told a lie. You all know that was the biggest lie that was ever told. Because the first lie that was told, when they said he was the father of the country, he didn't look like my father. He didn't look like yours. And the second lie he told was when he said he believed in freedom, justice, and equality, and he was one of the richest slave masters of his day. If he believed in freedom, justice, and equality, he should have freed the slave and divided up into states with those slaves built and given to the right owners. But you need to know that you got to tell your story. As the Hebrews, the Jews tell theirs. As the Irish tell theirs. As the Chinese tell theirs. Every other race in the world is proud of their family tree. If you're going to join the human race, you got to be proud of your own family tree. And listen to this, brothers and sisters. You see, you got the Ku Klux Klan and Jerry Falwells and all these other right-wingers and many others who are pretending to be liberals who believe that they're superior and we're inferior. Why is it important that we know that humanity descended from Africa, from black people? Because you know they performed melanocytosis tests on these skeletons and they found out that they had this melanocytosis in them, and that's what makes you black. You know you can't live in that hot sun without having a dark complexion. But they didn't have no sunscreen in it. The reason this is important is because if all human beings are descended from one human ancestor, from one ethnic group, then it means that there can be no superior or inferior people. All man has a common ancestry, and all are unique. This is the beginning of destroying what King talked about, the inferiority complex. And you see, I'm here to tell you, I often say that I wish that we had some Ku Klux Klan in the audience because they need this truth as much as we do. You see, black folks need to know this so that we kill our sense of inferiority. White folks need to know this so they kill their sense of superiority. And I say to David Dukes and all the David Dukes of the world, you know, that's that white man in the history of America, there has not been one documented instance of a black mass murder. And that includes Atlanta because they convicted that man on the flimsiest of evidence. And you know why? You know why? Because mass murderers are invariably men who did not bond with their mothers, who did not get love from their mother. And I'm saying that whatever's been absent in our home, most of our males and females have received love from our mothers. But you know what this needs to know, so we need to know that while we have not produced any mass murders, the black male is killing more black males than the white policeman is. And that's the young black male. That's the black male who's been targeted for extinction. That's the black male who's had drugs laid on him. I'm here to tell you there's been a conspiracy carried out at the highest levels of this government to whip your young men. You read this book on leadership by Dr. You ain't got to publish your own stuff to tell the truth. Ain't no white person going to publish stuff like this. You hear me? But brothers, older brothers, my age and younger, you got to hear this. We bear partial responsibility for that. Because you see, now in 40% of the households, there's a man in the house. And that's not the sister's fault. And most of the time, it's not the brother's fault either. Because he's been priced out of the house, he's been put in prison, he's been tricked into a traffic drug, and as long as our leadership is following this conservative, go by the rules, and be cool kind of thing, then they're not seeing the manly examples that they need. But I'm saying to the brothers here, we have to form groups in the black community where we begin to take young males and adopt them and give them love. The organization of 100 black men is doing that. I know some of the black churches are doing that. All of us need to do that. Every black male in the black community who is older needs to have from a younger black male who we will give examples of manhood to, because young black males are wasting other young black males because they have not had the example of how to relate to a man other than on a violent or frustrated level. So we need to teach our people to know ourselves. And when we know ourselves, we can respect ourselves. And we need to teach our people that the Bible says that princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall stretch forth its hand unto God. Is that true? And you need to know why that biblical passage was there, because part of the Bible says, and they were saying that Ethiopia would stretch forth its hand unto God, because we not only gave birth to humanity, black people with creative soul gave birth to civilization. And the Bible tells you that these ancient Ethiopians were the people of Cush. Isn't that right? The Greeks tell you that they were Ethiopians, which meant people of burnt faces. The Egyptians tell you that they were the top second people, the both people. You need to tell your children about these great Ethiopians, because these white Greeks said that the most beautiful men and women of the world, you need to understand, the Ethiopian wasn't black, he was blue black. He was beautiful black. And they said the most beautiful men and women of the world were these Ethiopians. They said they were the longest living of men and women, and they said they were the most just of men and women. And sisters, you need to hear this. They were considered to be the most just because in their system they had kings and queens. You understand? In Ethiopia, the woman ruled as often as the man ruled. And in fact, you couldn't be king unless the queen mother elected you. You hear me? And you see King came out of a legacy where the sparrow taught because he was speaking for what they call the confession of innocence, from which came the 10 Commandments. There were 42 confessions, and all the 10 Commandments are in there. It says, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery. But also in it was a state of mind, because King taught us that it's not enough to be physically peaceful, you should be spiritually peaceful. And so the teaching was, thou shalt not cause another to weep. Thou shalt not leave another in a state of fear. And so King, one of his greatest qualities was, as we come to honor this man, King believed in nonviolence. And King practiced nonviolence. And on the most important issue of the day, which was the issue of the war in Vietnam, King took a difficult stand. I want you to hear this with me, because many of your brothers, many of your fathers, many of your uncles went to Vietnam, and some of them didn't come back. Some of them came back wounded, and some of them came back scarred in the soul and in the heart, and some of them came back stone jumping because they were hooked, because this government knew that if they had black freedom fighters who had seen that the Vietnamese was not their enemy, that the Vietnamese had never lynched a black man or raped a black woman, that they were going to come back and be freedom fighters in America, so they said we'll cook them to prevent them from moving. So you need to understand that when King said Gordon no more, it was a difficult decision because he had the support of Lyndon Johnson. And you know, Lyndon Johnson, many have said that he was a friend of black people because he enacted the Civil Rights Bill. I want to say what I said in the beginning. Every bit of progress black people have made in America, we've made it because we decided to stand up. We forced Lyndon Johnson to enact the Civil Rights Bill. And so King lost the support of Lyndon Johnson on the war in Vietnam. His Secret Service protection was withdrawn. And in Muhammad's speech, I remember this in 1968, a Ku Klux Klansman was interviewed, and he said, this is Coon King Steve. 2 weeks later, Martin Luther King was murdered. Now this is something that some people who are afraid of the radical ministry don't want to hear, but you know you've got to hear the truth. I'm here to tell you that the FBI killed Martin Luther King. If you read the book Code Names Are, authored by Dick Gregory and Mark Twain, they document, and that's at the Blackbird bookstore, and you should read it in case you don't believe. Because you know, Double O Soul doesn't believe a lot of things that black folks say until it comes from another source. So, brothers and sisters, King stood up on the issue of today, and it pains me to stand before you at a time when we are honoring Martin Luther King and weapons are being rained on a little country called Iraq. And black soldiers who make up 30% of the army are laying out in the desert ready to die. It pains me because I have friends over there. Some of you have relatives over there. Some of you have fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters over there. It pains me. But I say this, brothers and sisters, you got to have some courage on your social issues. And you got to ask yourself a question. Is it right for black folks to shed blood in some country that never called us an insulting name, never lynched us or denied us a job, when the president who's sending them there wouldn't even sign a civil rights bill?
true that there's not a senator in the United States Senate that has a son or daughter in the Persian Gulf. And if it's true that only one or two congressmen in the House of Representatives have sons or daughters in the Persian Gulf, then don't tell me that in a democracy that the people who make decisions are the people who don't do the fighting, that this is a democracy, that every adult, black, white, brown, red, and yellow, should vote on the issue of peace or war. You hear me? And brothers and sisters, don't think over war is fighting, there's nothing we can do. Because you see, King showed us that the greatest democracy in this country occurred with black marching feet. That occurs when black folks decide to take the wishbone out of their back, that fishbone out of their back, and put some backbone there and stand up. So if you believe it's right, stand on your principles. King and Malcolm in the last year came to agreement on some things. You know, we have been often told how different they were. But you see, King in his last year, he wrote a book, Community or Chaos, Where Do We Go From Here? And in this book, King said, you can't blame black poverty on the inferiority of black people. You can't blame miseducation on the ignorance of black people. He said it's the way the country is structured. I'm quoting King. And this is something you need to learn from, because when you hear King's dream, you don't hear this. What did he mean when he said it was in the structure of the country? What he meant was that this economy is structured so there's always people out of work. And it's structured so the majority of those people are black and brown and red people. You understand? So King was saying, you got to change the structure if there's going to be justice. You see, the Bible says a people without vision perish. The worst thing that happened in slavery was that some of us lost the ability to dream. But King was a dreamer who brought his dreams down to earth and brought them into reality. So brothers and sisters, Malcolm also said the same thing. Malcolm was colorful in his language. He said that a chicken was no more designed to produce a duck egg than America is designed to produce trees. And Malcolm said, he said if a chicken could produce a duck egg, that would be a revolutionary thing. And he said, sure enough, if America could produce freedom, then America would be a revolutionary system. So I'm here to tell you that if you want freedom, if you want justice, if you want equality, we have to begin to conceive of a better society where every black child, every brown child, every red and yellow, every white child can fulfill the maximum of their potential. They can be what the Creator made them to be. Finally, and in conclusion, brothers and sisters, we have to ask ourselves this. We are here to honor King. What is it we need to do now to see that this is not just a feel-good session and that we don't begin to carry these things out through the rest of the year? And I say this to you, the first thing is this. There was a time when we had more unity in our community. There was a time when our churches and our families were stronger. And you see, we have an overriding task. I don't care whether it's in San Francisco or Oakland or Fort Lauderdale, Florida, we have a task to recreate a sense of African and African-American community good. I want you to hear this. Let me explain what that means. See, when blacks moved out of the South, and we thought we were moving to the land of milk and honey. We moved up north. And we moved off the plantation and moved into cities like Fort Lauderdale. We thought we had arrived. Some people said there was gold in the street. And then we found one extended family. Remember that time when all black folks was commissioned by every parent to look after their children? Remember when your child did wrong, Miss Sue or Mr. Rock to take care of business upside their refrigerator side? I didn't like it, and a lot of you didn't like it. But the fact of the matter is we came out to be better human beings because the whole community was teaching us to do right. Now today, if you take the average brother or sister who's doing wrong and you start to correct them, that brother is likely to try and correct you, and his mother and his father is likely to tell you that you don't have any business with their child. So in the churches, in the sororities, in the community groups, we have to begin to preach and teach that every black child is all of our children. We have to say that there's not going to be any more orphans in the black community. We're going to take these young children who don't have a mother or father and raise them ourselves in our own home. We've got to decide to do this. Brothers and sisters, I want to say this because this is the key thing we have to do. And I want you to listen real careful because I don't want you to misinterpret this. The worst thing that happens to black folks in America was slavery. But I'm here to tell you something. The civil rights movement was not fought for integration. It was fought for desegregation. It was fought to end segregation. But black folks did not fight to be white. They fought to have pride. They fought to have equal access to all the opportunities in this society. And I'm here to tell you that the next worst thing that's happened to black people since slavery has been integration. And what do I mean by that? And don't anyone leave here and say, this black man that the Martin Luther King Memorial Committee invited to speak was saying we should go back to segregation. No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying this. It is interesting that under segregated schools, where we had rundown schoolrooms, rundown textbooks, and underpaid teachers, our students were taught to read, write, ask, and multiply. So we're not talking about going back to segregation. But we are talking about doing what Jews do, what the Chinese Americans do, what Japanese Americans do, what all self-respecting people do. We have got to reclaim control of education in the black community. And the easiest thing to start with first is we have many people probably in this room who operate preschools. We need to organize at least. A friend of mine who works in the Black Center called Dr. James Scott. He recommends that we need, based on the last census, at least 18,000 new black preschools operating in the black community, teaching our young people how to read and write, how to add, subtract, and multiply and divide, because the younger you are, the smarter you are. You know, right here in Lauderdale, for the last 3 years, part of your community has been in a battle with the Board of Education fact, it leads us before we get it. Because most of us are so in debt that when we get our paycheck, we have to send it out to all those white folks back and don't even have enough to pay on. So a top foremost agenda of the 1990s has got to be that black folks come together and we start to pool the wealth of the black community to build businesses in the black community. And you know, some of you are doing this in your churches, and you're really praise that you're doing it, and in your community organization. Some of you have credit unions. But you know, credit unions are the best way for us to pool our wealth. Because you see, you can control the credit union. You can't control the bank. You understand? And the way banks are collapsing now, you saw what happened with Korean National Bank, a black bank. Any money over $100,000, they only got 50 cents on the dollar. But the bank in New England, if they had $1 billion, they got $1 billion plus. So brothers and sisters, we got to pool our wealth. Another thing that's important, we've been talking about King's Dream. We have got to begin to institutionalize culture in the black community. We need to build state-of-the-art cultural centers in the black community that teach our history and culture. And finally, we have to train our youth in the art of organizing, train our parents and our community leaders in the art of organizing. You know why? Because by the year 2020, so this is information you don't get on television. A majority of the people of this country are going to be black, brown, red, and white. And we must prepare your children now for leading this country. We must take a vision of the future that is one in which we are not following, but we are taking King's dreams and bringing it alive in the future. And we must also say this, though I am in Fort Lauderdale, or whether I am from Richmond, California, the fate of me as one African is based on the fate of my brothers and sisters in South Africa, in North Africa, in West Africa, and East Africa. And we must begin to reestablish links with our African brothers and sisters. Finally, Dr. Martin Luther King had a favorite poem, and this poem speaks to the justice of our Creator. King used to say, he said, truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future, behind the demon's throne, stands a God within the shadows, keeping watch above the throne. As King would say, truth thrust to the earth will rise again. As the Egyptian and the Christian teachings speak, our God is just God, but our God will only do for us when we do for ourselves. So we have to prepare to stand up, to fight for our rights, so that we can say, as King said, at a time where it means something, free at last, free at last. Good God Almighty, free at last. Thank you.